here. Is that good, Jessica?
Yep, that looks great.
Okay, good. So kind of talk through what we've done. Just a little quick history. Bob Norton is a very good friend of mine. I've known him for about 15 years, and he was a missionary pilot down in Venezuela. And so almost 3 years ago now, on one of his flights, it was an emergency medical flight, he and 6 others went missing. And so this presentation will kind of show you what we've done and what's come about as a result of us working on trying to find this crash site in the jungles of Venezuela. So just a little quick history about what happened that morning. Bob had left the his home base there in Mile Rock, which is down, it's near the Brazilian border, and he had his wife and 5 others on board. One was a school teacher, and then there were some indigenous Indians. You see in the background there, that's the kind of terrain that we're dealing with. It's very, it's about 10,000 square miles of just jungle. Not a lot of clearings out there, a whole lot of trees. But they flew to a little village, Karoon is the name of it, which is out near a large mountainous area called YV2480. And when Bob took off from there, he radioed back into his home base back at Mile Rock, which is a little over an hour away. And the weather was kind of bad, and probably he was scuttle running and flying, under the clouds and trying to make his way to get help for this little girl he had picked up. He had dropped off 2 people there in Karoon, and then he had picked up a sick girl that had appendicitis, and her mother. So he's back to 7 people again, which any of you who fly know that a Cessna 182, which is what he was flying, he was over on capacity from the weights that we have. We don't think he was much over on weight, but he did have more people in the plane than it's designed for. Pretty typical probably of bush pilots. They tend to kind of push the envelope a little bit. So anyways, he took off and headed out. There was a flight, there was a call back maybe 30, 35 minutes into the flight. They couldn't make out what he was saying, and that was the last that he was heard from. So he did not have a PLB, no personal locating beacon, and during the entire search, the ELT on the plane was never, there's no signal received from that. Of course, they don't last very long. They don't sound off for very long before they run the battery down if it went off at all. Unfortunately, some of you may know this, the satellite that the U.S. has up and that's monitored for the 121.5 ELT signal, it was turned off February the 1st of 2009. Bob went down February 16th. So we didn't have that bit of information to work with, so we don't know if there was ever an ELT signal. Initially, we weren't real sure what to do here in the U.S. because, obviously it's thousands of miles away, and I don't really have any contacts or anything down there, or didn't at that time. So the civil protection is their first responders down in. Let's see if I can get my slides to work here. Okay, there's a picture of Bob and his wife, and then there's the school teacher, and then there's the picture of the girl in the red is the one that had appendicitis, and her mom is the one there in the blue, and then the other 2 that were on the plane we don't actually have a picture of. The area that they went down in, you can see on this slide, is down near the Brazilian border. That whole lower portion of Venezuela, there's just a lot of Amazonian-type jungle there. It's pretty dense jungle. So there's a satellite imagery of the weather, and as we're putting all this information together now, as we've been working on this search, one of the things that the Brazilian Space Agency has provided for us is 15-minute increments of the weather. So as we're flying, doing flight simulations, our flight simulation pilots are going to be able to have a little more accurate picture of what the weather was doing to Bob as he was flying that morning. But there it gives you an idea. You can see there's a lot of cloud cover, and it was rainy and windy, which is pretty common weather down there. So the initial search took place. It was traditional. The civil protection came in with helicopters and airplanes, and then the indigenous Indians did ground search. The civil protection, once again, you can see in this picture just how the terrain looks. It's it's be pretty easy to bury a plane up into that and be hard to find. There was 142 people with civil protection. and they had about looks like 8 aircraft is what they had flying for, the search effort. They flew for about 20 days, over 200 hours, actually longer than what they normally would do. They knew Bob Norton, and he well known and well loved in that area. He had flown a lot of people out that were injured and sick from these little villages. So Civil Protection worked really hard and continue to work with us as we've moved forward with this search. But they did the traditional flying. There's a map of the GPS tracks from all the aircraft that the Civil Protection used when they were flying down there. And so that's the area down at the bottom where it all comes to a point. That's where Bob took off from. And then that's the area surrounding the mountainous Guaycanima Mountains there that's kind of in the center of the image there. And so this is equivalent to what the U.S. dollars of what they spent on the search. This is from some charts some slides that they brought up to one of our summits. So they spent over $100,000 in fuel and equipment and pilots looking for Bob. So pretty good commitment. Definitely, above and beyond the call, they certainly worked very diligently to try to find him. On the ground, the indigenous Indians, who they obviously all knew Bob because he had been in and out of their villages a lot to pull people out there that were injured. And Bob's right-hand man, Celsa, kind of spearheaded the Indians going into the jungle and basically taking machetes and going and looking for where they thought maybe the plane might have gone down. Celsa himself spent over 100 days in the jungle looking for him. Contracted malaria. It was just really, it's a harsh environment to be on the ground. And they focused primarily around this Guaycanima area. They call those tapoys that stick up out of the ground like that. You can see it in the picture there. And so traditional, kind of on the ground type search. 139 Indians that helped Celsa out, and they actually found an old plane that had been missing for like 30 years. As they were searching for Bob's plane, they of course got pretty excited when they saw the airplane there, but it was from a wreck that had happened many years ago. So they did not find anything. So what we did up here, we were like, okay, what can we do to help? So we thought, well, perhaps based on what they did with the Steve Fawcett search, we could see if we could get current satellite imagery of the areas where Bob may have crashed, and then we could analyze that from up here. So we got with Google Earth. They put us in touch with GeoEye and Digital Globe, and we got satellite imagery of the areas that we thought were most likely places that that Bob might have crashed. And then we trained up a bunch of volunteers, and they searched through, just eyes-on, searched through these images. And you can see right there is an example of some of the things that they saw. You see in that lighter colored box there. And so we would ask them to look for things that might be a piece of something mechanical, to make measurements with Google Earth. So the images we imported into Google Earth, and if it was something somewhat close to what a Cessna 182 size would be, or a tail section or whatever, then we would mark that down as a POI, a point of interest. So the team that did this provided about 700 POIs, of which we drilled down to about 60. And so our first trip down to Venezuela, which was 4 or 5 months after Bob went missing, we went and looked at these points of interest. They were, unfortunately, not any of them were the crash site. Some interesting things like strange patterns in rocks and stuff that we thought must be something mechanical turned out to be just a strange pattern in the rock. So educational on our part, and the imagery, satellite imagery, it was helpful, but unfortunately did not yield the crash site. And so there's me. I'm in the center there of that picture, the tall gringo, and Bob's son is on my far left. He went with me on the first trip down there, and he's bilingual. Bob's good friend, Dr. Pedro, is standing beside me with the hat on, and then Celso, Bob's right-hand man, is the one there on the cell phone. So when we came back, at Cloudland Canyon, which is a Georgia State Park, sponsored us to have a search summit. So we brought a couple of the members from the Civil Protection up, and Rick Slatton and Debbie from the MAST organization, the Missing Aircraft Search Team. They came out and helped us, and we we spent a weekend together with a bunch of volunteers going over all of the data that we had and put together a containment analysis. And so this is the containment analysis, the initial one, and you'll notice Zone D is kind of a strange shape there. It's a triangle within a triangle. That was an area that a radio transmission came out of on the third day of the search. Somebody supposedly transmitted on 121.5, and one of the search and rescue helicopters picked it up on their directional finder. They got one hit on the directional finder, and it was on a heading, and then they never got a second one. So that area represents that single heading of 270 of where that 1 6-second transmission came on 121.5. So we spent some time on my second trip. That was one of our priority zones because we thought maybe the transmission was in English. It was a male's voice. It was weak. It only lasted for 6 seconds. So we thought, well, we'll go out that direction and see if perhaps Bob had crashed somewhere over there and had transmitted on the emergency broadcast the ELT signal frequency. So my second trip down was just to do that, and so I spent 4 days in the jungle. It was just really very slow going, and we did not find anything, unfortunately. And so when we came back from that, we're like, okay, let's do flight simulations. We had some more information of some other eyewitnesses, and so we started doing flight simulations and thinking about, okay, what else can we do? And we started talking about building a, basically taking a large remote-controlled airplane and mounting some cameras and sensors on it to see if we could fly that to help locate the crash site. Because chopping through the jungle was not, I mean, that just did not make sense to try to do more of that. So the NASA's Goddard Space Flight Center, one of our team members is from NASA, and so she put us in contact with the folks at Goddard, and they had us come up there. They had been working for years on a synthetic aperture radar system to try to find downed aircraft, and so we met with them, and they looked at what we were trying to do, which is basically build a small UAV with cameras and perhaps some sort of a radar on it. And so in the process of being there, we also found out about John Dill out at Yosemite and made contact with him, and he's joined our effort and has helped us a tremendous amount with just the whole search investigation. So he, I'll talk more about the UAV in just a minute, but he invited us out to Yosemite. We did a little presentation at NASAR this past year, and then we went on out to Yosemite, and John Dill's in the picture there with the yellow shirt on. Many of you may know him. Just an absolutely fantastic search investigator. And so we brought up, again, some of the folks from the Venezuelan Civil Protection, and he just took us into the weeds about the importance of all the details, and and the investigation process needs to be very thorough. A gentleman from that meeting has joined our effort. He's from the MASS organization also, Tim Evinger, and he's actually going down with me on our next trip this coming February, which is about a month away, month and 7 days away. And so we began to do a lot more thorough investigative work. John Dill's comment was, we can have all the cool technology in the world, but if we're looking in the wrong place, we're not going to find them. So we had a really good weekend there of getting information from the Civil Protection, additional information, and starting to put together a GIS model of all of this. Eden Kane is on our team. He works for ESRI. ESRI has sponsored us with some of their software and server space so that we can load all of this information in and make a GIS model, which is Geospatial Information System, and you guys may use that. It's pretty nice way to put all this information in layers, all the weather, all the flight simulations, all the stuff from the satellite image analysis, any information about anything, from eyewitnesses to whatever, all goes into this model, and you can peel it back in layers or layer it back, to whatever you want to try to determine what makes sense to go, where it makes sense to go look. So we started building a UAV that is basically just a glorified remote control plane, but it's Eden Kane from ESRI had been developing, unknown to us, he'd been developing a flight software for search and rescue UAV for several years. And so when he found out about us, we connected, and he's joined our effort here, and has now has flight software developed that has our UAV flying. Well, he's got a development UAV. Our UAV's the one that we're going to take to Venezuela is actually being worked on over in Sparta, Tennessee. So anyway, he the team's still growing here as we've been working on this UAV, and our goal is to mount a an infrared camera, a regular high definition camera, and GoPro camera on the bottom of it, as well as a 500 megahertz radar, which we have some students at Tennessee Tech that are helping us with that, to be able to fly grid and scan an image and overlap the, geotag and overlap the images, so that all that, it's kind of like what Aggie Air, if you guys have seen what they're doing, they've got a UAV that they've put together for agricultural purposes, and we've been talking with them and learning from some of the things they did. So then we map all this stuff, bring it all back, and load it into this server with all the ESRI tools, and start analyzing it, looking for something that might indicate where this thing crashed. So as this thing's flying, this is what the screen looks like at the base station. It's sending back basic, this UAV is sending back basic information to us, like its speed and altitude, and then it's locating it on a screen there, so we know where the UAV is. Every second it sends us a little blast of information back. And so we take it off manually, land it manually. Tennessee Tech's helping us. This past semester, they gave course credit to their seniors for designing a launch and recovery system for us, because we don't have good runways out there to take this thing off. It's so we have to launch it from a rail, and then we catch it in this big net. And so just kind of give you an idea of some of the things that's going into this. We're looking for a 2-hour duration with this flight. We've got a 53 cc 5-horsepower engine on it. We want to fly fairly fast because the winds and stuff are significant in Venezuela, and so if you're thinking maybe why don't we use a glider plane, we talked about that, but a glider plane, although very efficient, can't handle all the crosswinds and all the weather and stuff that we'll have to deal with down there. So we've got cameras and stuff, of course, going on it, and we're even working with Dr. Voss from the cadaver farm in Knoxville at the UT Knoxville, and not for this particular search, but because it's been almost 3 years. But if it's a fairly recent search and there has been fatalities, then there's a possibility. Dr. Voss thinks that by putting like sulfur and ketone and aldehyde type sensors on the wings, that we can at least maybe pick up higher concentrations of those in an area where there may have been someone that died from the incident. So as we're starting to develop this thing, we realize, as we're working with these other agencies, there's a need, and it could work to help with search and rescue here in the U.S. So we've kind of partnered with STARS out of Chattanooga, or Hamilton County in Tennessee, and it's a special tactics and rescue service. And as we develop this, they're going to start using it here locally, which helps them out, and but then also helps us out to prove the technology out and to get it ruggedized enough to be able to take it to Venezuela. If it can handle the Tennessee mountainous area over here near Chattanooga, it should be it's a good testing ground for us. And then, like it says here, as you look at the very bottom, it says all sensors and imaging are geotagged. So that's kind of the cool thing about this. Since we know every second where we're at GPS-wise, any hit we get on any kind of sensor, we just tag it. So then we can go back and look at that and go back and find it. So let's see if I can get this next page to work. Okay, so there is a picture of our current, whoops, sorry. That's the one that we've had 2 of these donated to us. They were actually a competition plane. It's an 8-foot wingspan, polystyrene, and So the designer and builder of this is Neil Zook, and he is building us a custom one, but he's given us these two to work with to actually get it flying and get everything pulled together. Now, obviously, you don't just take a UAV into Venezuela, so a lot of what we're doing right now, too, is working with the Venezuelan officials to get the right permissions in place and you know, and make them comfortable with the fact that this is a non-military humanitarian, you know, search effort, and working closely with the Civil Protection. The governor of the state of Bolivar is aware of what we're wanting to do, and so we're hopeful that on our next trip down there we'll actually meet with him or one of his representatives to go over the details of this. So this just gives you kind of a little simple picture of what we're trying to do. Obviously, as we fly with this UAV, we won't be sending back the imagery. We'll just be logging it in, and then when we land the plane, we'll download the information and then send it on another sortie to go map, you know, additional areas. There's the launcher and the net catchers standing behind. So there's the Tennessee Tech team, which is really kind of neat because the Tennessee Tech students, you know, they like to have a real life problem instead of just busy work for their senior project. So they did a really nice job this semester. They're going to be working on getting it field ready, trying to lighten it up and make it more, you know, more easily portable. But system works pretty nicely, and then the net catch system is just a very forgiving way to catch this plane, so that it doesn't, you know, we don't have to try to land it on the ground. So our current work is we're building this GIS model. PBWorks has helped us out with a place to store all. We have like a virtual office now because we have, you know, members from Venezuela to California to Ohio to Tennessee, you know, so any of you that work on any kind of expanded team like that, you know, it can be pretty challenging just keeping all the information where everybody can get to it. You'll continue to work on our UAV, which we're just kind of calling it the aerial search platform, ASP-1 and 2. Working on our approvals in Venezuela, and our next trip down will be all investigation work, which, like I mentioned, will be in the middle of February. Then when we come back from that, we'll have another summit, and we'll modify our containment analysis based on what additional information we find. And then we start moving towards, you know, trying to take the UAV down there. Hopefully later in this year, we're looking for a possible date in September to go back down again. So there's just a picture of some of the team there. Just a fantastic group of people, and you know, I can never say thanks enough to all the folks that have helped and are continuing to help as we have worked on this and work on this search effort. Just you know, you can't do something like this without a good team, obviously. We have a website, findingbobnorton.org, and we keep that current. And so, you know, anybody that wants to kind of see what we're doing, we have you know, we have updates on there pretty frequently. And I'm hanging up here again. Okay, I think that was my, yeah, there we go. And so we, you know, we have a Facebook discussion board, and we have a Twitter account. So, you know, if you go to the website there, you can see the links to those things. There's a nice little YouTube clip on there. It's about 6 minutes long that just shows, you know, if you wanted to show to somebody or explain to somebody, you know, in 6 minutes what this effort's all about, it's an easy way to do it. Just click on that. And so at this point, I guess I'm ready to open the floor for questions.
Okay, great. Thank you very much, Bob. If anybody has any questions, go ahead and type them into your questions/chat or chat/question section of your control panel. And I'm going to go ahead and switch the screens. Alrighty. Okay, so it looks like we have one question. With this being 3 years ago, what is your goal in still sending a UAV to Venezuela?
Our goal at this point is just to find the crash site, find out what happened, give closure to the family and friends. I mean, there's seven people on board the plane, so that's our primary goal now, is just to try to give closure to the family members.
Okay. And we have another question. Will you keep looking forever, or is there a stopping point likely?
That is a great question, and I've actually been asked that question a lot of times. What we'll do is we'll look as long as there's something to do, and right now we have a lot of things that we're doing, and then hopefully some of this will help with other search, search efforts as well. So yeah, so I don't know. I mean, I don't have a cutoff point. It's just there's more things to do, and so we just keep stepping forward. And the team is strong and committed, and and then working with these other search agencies like STARS and the MAST organization and Yosemite's YOSAR, and it's just if we can develop some things that will help them, then that gives us motivation to keep going too.
Okay, great. What is your greatest challenge on the ground in Venezuela?
It's just really, it's interesting. A lot of people thought that like the brush would be so heavy that you just would have to chop for every foot of movement that you make, but there's so much overhead stuff that actually lots of it you can kind of walk through, but you still swing in the machete to mark your trail so you don't get lost. So it's the heat and humidity and lack of air movement down in the jungles of what was really tough for me. And I'm in fairly good shape, but boy, I got through with 4 days down there. It was physically very challenging. The malaria is bad, but we take medication to prevent that. The problem there is that you just, even though it's not in a lot of places, it's not like so thick that you can't walk, but you still can't see very far. There's so much dense jungle that you could walk 50 feet away from this crash site and completely miss it and not know it. So that's one of the reasons that we're thinking, okay, we got to try to get something that can fly over and help identify where something metal may be. And that's what this FOPAN radar does. And they've had some pretty good success with it. It's just we can't use a military version because we're going into Venezuela. So we have to kind of make our own. That's why we've got Tennessee Tech helping us. We have to make our own simpler version. But what it basically does is just bounces a radar signal down against, it was a low-power 15-watt radar signal down against the canopy, and then which the 400 megahertz penetrates the tree, the leaves and stuff, and then we're looking for a signal response back from something metal. So yeah, the density of the jungle is probably the biggest challenge. And if you're flying over it and you're looking with your eyes, that's another reason why we're going to. There are breaks in the trees and gaps in the trees, but you can't fly too close to the jungle; it's too dangerous. So you could very easily fly right over what might be a piece of a wing or whatever that you could see through the tree gaps and completely miss it. So we saw that when we were down on our first trip and did a lot of flying over the area. It's just very easy to fly right over something that might have been worth looking at. Hopefully that answers the question.
Yeah, I think it did. The next one is, how well are you, it's kind of a two-part question. How well are you received by the Venezuelan people, like the villagers, and are you concerned for your own safety?
Yes, I actually have, I have 12 adopted kids, so I have, a lot of responsibility and reason to be careful, because I obviously want to come back. But the people in the big city of Caracas, I get nervous there just because it's a big city. We try to have somebody meet us there and take care of us and get us through that city. When we're down in the jungle areas, they treated me wonderfully. I mean, nobody treated me bad in the big city. I'm just nervous because I'm not a big city person, and I know there's it is kind of known for being a kind of a dangerous city, especially to be as obviously a gringo as I am. I'm 6'5" and white, so I stand out pretty much. But the folks down in the Grand Savannah, in Mile Rock, and out in the jungles, I mean, they took really good care of me. They, the military is all around all the little cities and towns and stuff, and so they're always questioning why I'm there, and I have to have my paperwork with me at all times so I can show them, my passport and all that. But so yeah, there's a concern for safety. We try to be very careful, but as far as how the Indians and stuff treat me is just wonderful. I mean, I've just fallen in love with I see why Bob, works so hard to help them. And so was there a second part to that, or did I answer?
You answered both parts.
Okay. So it makes me nervous. I mean, it makes me nervous every time I go down there. There's no doubt about that.
Yeah. Okay, and one more question. Can you go over the decisions for management setup of your operation and logistics, such as ICS and areas of responsibility, and then also any lessons you've learned along the way?
Yeah, I have actually I'm an engineer by trade, and I only have a little bit of experience in search and rescue. I just had worked with a little local fire department as a volunteer first responder, and then also with Dade County, Georgia Mountain Rescue. And so, I just knew just the basics of incident command structure. And in this situation here, I found myself all of a sudden in this leadership role because I'm looking for my friend and looking for anybody that can help me and anybody that will come along and be a part of this effort. And then I'm working with people like John Dill, who have 40 years experience. He's 72 years old, and he's had 40 years experience in search and rescue, and he's joining in to help. And so, just from a personal point of view, I mean, I'm intimidated. I mean, he's not. He's a wonderful guy, but I mean, my lack of knowledge. But he's just helped me and shown me, here's the things you need to focus on. He's basically kind of adopted me and become my mentor. And so, our structure as we pull together here has been a lot of really experienced people helping me out in this effort, and they have much more experience than I do in leading investigations, but they're not wanting to be in charge of this operation. They want to come on board and help, like Tim Evinger is going down with me. He's an investigator. He's a sheriff from Klamath Falls, and he has way more experience than I do, but he wants to be on board the team and support. So I just, once again, I'm probably not answering their question. I don't have a whole lot of experience in incident command at all. And so this has been a lot of figuring out, okay, who does what. And I do know that the best success stories usually happen with really good people on board, and we have really good people on board helping. So a big part of what I do is coordinating what needs to be done next and who's working on what and who needs help with what. And then, then anything I can do to basically get any resources that we need to help further the effort. So I'm not an expert in incident command at all. I think that what they did down there, civil protection, they use pretty much conventional IC, and Dr. Garcia is the head of civil protection in the state of Bolivar. And from what I've seen of what they did was pretty conventional, bringing the aircraft in. What's unique is that when we got involved, we helped pull the Indians and the civil protection together because they normally don't work together. And usually civil protection just comes in and does their own thing. And so they've told me straight up that it was good to work directly with the Indians because they are very good on the ground. So it's kind of like whoever's good at what they do, let's make sure they're doing it, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
I probably did not answer their question anywhere. I mean, they probably want a much better understanding of how we operate organizationally, but it's very, we're a group of volunteers, and we've come together to try to find this crash site.
Okay, great. There's one other. Have you been asked for help by other people who have had family members or friends disappear in other parts of the world?
It's interesting that they asked that. We've had 2 additional requests that we're starting to try to help with. This particular effort for Bob Norton, I work full time, and like I mentioned, I've got a big household, so I probably spend 10 to 20 hours a week on this effort. But we are using some of our resources that we've made along that we have in place from what we've done to help with 2 other searches. One of them, a gentleman walked away from a car. Him and his wife were stranded, and they've asked us to help with that. This happened, I think, 6 or 8 months ago. And then there's another one, I think it's a missing aircraft in the Grand Canyon area somewhere over there that they just talked to us about very recently, so I don't know any of the details of that one yet. And so we're glad to help any way we can, because anything that we've learned along the way that might benefit, and once we have our UAV doing everything we want it to do, we'll be glad to bring it over to help out in the meantime, the one with the gentleman that walked away from the car, we're going to see if Aggie Air will bring their agricultural UAV over to map this area, because satellite imagery is good, but if you can fly a high-resolution camera, 700 or 800 feet off the ground and overlap and geotag the images, then now you've got something you can really work with. We would love to already have that in place for this search, but we're still developing the UAV. So yeah, we've had a couple of other requests. And what's cool too is that we're working with STARS, which they've had a couple of incidents already that if we had the UAV already airborne with the cameras, we would have used to help them out as well.
Awesome. Okay, that looks like all of the questions so far. If you are typing one in, go ahead or have one on your head, just go ahead and type it in, and we'll see if we can get to it before the end of the presentation. But in the meantime, I'm going to go ahead and do some closing things. You can visit our website, which is pmirope.com/rescue-tv/webinars. It's shown on your screen. There will be a link there to ask Bob further questions via email. You can also download the slides from this presentation or watch the live recording of the webinar. Also, the PMI webinar series hosts webinars frequently, so keep an eye on our website for future dates and topics. And we also update our website along with our newsletter and our Twitter and our Facebook with all of our upcoming webinars, along with everything else that's going on at PMI. And I know that the search effort also has the Twitter and Facebook and YouTube. So those are definitely good resources for any information that you'd like. And we haven't any other questions, so I'm going to go ahead and close it up. So thank you guys very much for listening, and thank you, Bob, so much for presenting this. It was very interesting.
My pleasure. Glad to have the opportunity.
Have a great day, everyone.
All right. Thank you.